Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for returning after our lunch break on our closed session. Madam Clerk.
Item 2, report of closed session. Public employment. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, Economic Development Director, the Board authorized the CAO to conduct reference checks and extend a conditional offer to the successful candidate pending background check. Upon successful completion of the background, the CAO will announce the name of the successful applicant.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any public comment? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
So, returning to our regular agenda, we are on item 13 and from the Administrative Office to establish an ad hoc committee for the Calaveras County Transient Occupancy Tax TOT review and appoint 2 supervisors to said committee.
CEO Lutz.
Yes, this item bringing to the board really in follow-up to a number of discussions that have been had with some of our industry partners and at this board previously on looking at putting an initiative on the ballot to increase the TOT from, or to some level. Basically, Calaveras is at 6% right now, which is the lowest levels in the state. There are other municipalities that have that same level, but there's an opportunity for us to look at potentially increasing that. As we know right now, currently we spend our transient occupancy tax funds on the Sheriff's Department, on the Roads and Bridges program, on our fire districts, and also for the Visitors Bureau. And so those really are trying to address when visitors are coming in, collecting a proportionate amount of usage that they come to provide services for them while they're here. This committee would really help with working with the community, the stakeholders, most notably, of course, the Visitors Bureau, but then other stakeholders within the community to do outreach, to look at how we want to message any increase that we do, and then be able to provide report outs back to the board. The initial thinking is trying to target something for the June 2018 ballot, but again, that would part of that time frame would be this committee working with the industry and get an idea of when is the most successful time, whether it be the June or the November ballot, and how we would message that. So with that, we're requesting 2 supervisors to serve on that committee, and then we can start bringing the people together to have the discussions.
Thank you, CEO Lutz.
I would like to serve on that committee.
One volunteer?
Just a question, not a volunteer. Tim, what is the average, amongst our other counties, what is their normal TOT rate?
In general, 10% is a pretty common number for a lot of the rural counties similar to ours. A couple are looking at actually going for a measure themselves to go to 12%, but typically in our type of a region, our type of an environment, rarely would you see above 12%. You're really looking at the, San Francisco, San Diego's, places like that would be higher than that. Yeah.
I think to provide a good balance here, you have one of the districts that does not receive a whole lot of TOT, and the one making the largest contribution of TOT is District 3, so I would nominate Mike as being the alternative. That'll give you a high and a low.
I would accept that nomination.
You're the big income producer, and you don't have a whole lot, so give a good balance.
Comments? Any further volunteers? Supervisor Tofanelli.
I will second that motion.
Okay.
That was a motion. I will second.
Any public comment?
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. George Fry. I hope that the 2 that are selected can educate the innkeepers in this county. I don't know why it didn't pass before. It's ludicrous to me. I mean, I have traveled all over the state, and I've been in San Francisco where it was really very steep. But you really don't look at that even as somebody that's traveling. And it seems like the innkeepers in this county are just really anti that. I don't know who approached CAO Lutz, but I certainly would hope that it would be some strong innkeeper that could be brought on board. And the other thing is there just going to be the 2 board members, or are you going to have public members?
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Mr. DeOro?
Mike, you're volunteering to sit on the committee too, I take it? Since you
No,
got money coming into
I wasn't trying to become one of your regulars, I'm sorry. But, things change, and then sometimes things just don't change. There was a day when I sat there where you guys are, and we attempted this several times. I think where you have to put your information out is what services the public services give to people coming into our county. And if the sheriff could give some kind of indication what it is, for McAllen Hill Fire, probably 2/3 of the auto accidents, which is one of our major businesses, has to do with out-of-town people. It seems to me what happened before is most people do not like taxes, and this is one of the few times that they have an opportunity to say no. So I think you're going to have to make that thing work for them, but good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? There's a motion, a second on the floor to have 2 representatives of the Board of Supervisors sit on this ad hoc committee. It's my understanding that that's Supervisor Clapp and myself, Supervisor Oliveira. Any discussion by the board?
Is there going to be any public members?
Well, let's get the members on the vote on this, and we'll discuss that in a moment. CAO Lutz, before we call for the vote, you have comment?
Yeah, one consideration, council and I were discussing, for the purposes of developing the ad hoc committee, we'd want to really define out a targeted end date for the committee, and then also the scope or purpose of that committee. And is it cleanest for being in the motion? Is that what you're looking for in terms of the actual scope within that? Okay.
Okay, so, council, we can combine that in this motion and vote, or is that a separate issue?
No, it would be in the same, certainly, it could certainly be in the same motion. And
Then I'd go back to Supervisor Mills. Do you want to amend your motion?
Yeah, I would amend the motion to ensure that the committee works with the public and with the business owners to provide the best discourse or conversation, so that if there is a matter put before the voters on a ballot measure, that there's a clear understanding of who benefits and why. And the defined period of time would be until such, in the course of a year, or until such time as it's placed on a ballot. With a maximum being a year. Maximum 1 year. 1 year.
My second will hold.
All right. Further public comment on the amended motion? Seeing none? Madam Clerk, you have a comment?
So just to clarify, so it's for a maximum of 1 year, or at the time it goes on to a ballot, whichever comes first?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Motion is clear to all members of the board. No further public comment. I'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0, unanimous.
Get another job.
I want this one.
You're smiling there.
Madam
Jim.
Clerk.
Item 14 is from the Administrative Office to establish a pension liability ad hoc committee to review potential pension pre-funding options and appoint 2 supervisors to said committee.
This item also, I feel, is a pressing matter that requires as timely attention as possible. The Finance Committee within the county, which is comprised of myself, the Auditor Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, and also the Assessor, had a meeting to kind of discuss some pre-funding options with an organization that's really the largest that does pre-funding options. We have a follow-up meeting that's scheduled in person with that organization in January, but one of the things that we felt is important, one is to have some board members involved in that discussion at the earliest phase, but also I think at a broader level beyond pre-funding is discussing overall our the pension structure within the county, our liabilities, and work to really map out a good plan. The handout that is that the audience has and then was distributed to the board members is unfortunately sobering, but also critical for the consideration for the necessary work that the committee has. And I want to thank the Auditor Controller who pulled a bunch of the revenue information for me yesterday, which saved me a ton of time, so I appreciate that. The 2 graphs on there are really showing 2 different, one's showing percentages, one's showing dollars. It's really mapping the same occurrence, which is 2017-18, what our current PERS contribution rates are at for both our miscellaneous membership and also for our safety membership. And then you can see over the next 5 years the astronomical growth within that rate. This is, an issue that most all counties are facing. Certainly the PERS counties are, with PERS changing the discount rate and also working to recoup the unfunded liability portion of the pensions. So what that translates to, obviously, the percentage, that's the percentage that the contribution is of payroll, which then directly attributes to the next graph, which shows the actual expenditures, where, as we see, our estimated PERS expenditures over the next 5 years more than doubling. As I alluded to in report out, I think last meeting, the PERS board is again looking at their actuarial rates. They're again looking at what they do for that recoup period, a 30-year time horizon versus a 20-year time horizon. All things that'll impact this number, likely more to the negative. And so it's incumbent on us then to be developing some plans and having this discussion at an early onset. The second part of that sheet really is trying to show the discretionary revenue growth within the county. And as we all know, over the last 7 years, really, it's been relatively stagnant because of recovery from the Great Recession, then impacts of Butte Fire, very little growth with the exception of 1 or 2 years. On pace with that, though, has been the continual rise in PERS contributions that was before really the impact of unfunded liability. You could see in general, we've seen roughly a 2% average growth rate in PERS over the last 7 years. Contrast that to the graph above, and you can see just what a tsunami this is going to be when it begins to roll out to the county and the county general fund. On average, about 60% of those PERS costs are within the general fund. So what I'm looking for, what we're requesting, is an ad hoc committee be established to be looking at the unfunded pension liabilities, to meet with potential vendors on pre-funding options if we choose to do that. Obviously, bringing that back to the board for additional discussion should we feel that that's the direction to go, but really engage the county's finance committee in a discussion about the pension liability in the county.
Supervisor Garamendi.
The membership of the, thank you. The membership of the finance committee that currently exists has supervisors on it, correct?
The finance committee itself of the county does not have board members on it. It's, like I said, it's the CAO, the auditor controller, treasurer, tax collector, and the assessor.
Okay, I would think of a different committee, but why would we want to have what is the purpose of having it ad hoc versus dealing with it here in the public setting? And why would we do that versus, I mean, we've all got a dog in this fight, so.
There are ultimately, obviously, any recommendation is going to come back to the public, the board. I think the point behind an ad hoc committee is if it involves needing to travel to meet with a vendor, if it involves trying to schedule time with a vendor or a couple vendors to look at possible scenarios, coming back and trying to do some reports, deciding how granular we want to get on some of this information. It just provides a little more speed and flexibility on the initial front end. Obviously, the back end still needs to be discussed.
Is it appropriate to be meeting with vendors before we've decided whether pre-funding is actually a good idea? I mean, it's always a risk to give our money to a private vendor and gamble with public funds.
Well, obviously, we're not giving them money until we have a chance to actually bring them back. Right now, for instance...
But what my point is should we make that decision before we start interviewing people, whether that's something we even want to explore?
Well, actually, that's a good point. I mean, I'd certainly be happy to come back and say, is this something that we would like to? I don't know if the...
Yeah.
Because as you and I have discussed, just a second. As you and I have discussed before, these are retirement funds for all of our employees. And the idea of handing them over for a short period of time to a private fund to try to make an extra buck and take that risk that's associated with it needs to be a big policy discussion that should be done in public.
So the funds that we would be talking about are not retirement funds. They would be funds that the county has set aside, and that it would be a policy direction by the Board of Supervisors on how you want to continue to fund or pre-fund.
But we set these funds aside for CalPERS,
Supervisor
right?
Garamendi.
We set them aside initially for the 27th payroll and also to smooth PERS rates. So there is over $1 million sitting in a restricted fund for this purpose, because anyone who's been on the supervisor long enough or has watched my discussions with regards to PERS, I have said for many, many years, the bill's coming. The bill is here now. So, unfortunately, we have not made great strides in order to deal with this and address this. And I don't think there's one magic pill here. There's not going to be just pre-funding. We are all in this together, and it's going to take many ideas and many avenues in order to get us all out of this. Pre-funding is an option because right now those funds are sitting in our treasury, and we have a pooled interest rate. We earn 1%. So do we think that we could get better than 1%? Yes. At an extremely conservative investment portfolio? Yes, we could. Those are the options that we're looking at, and those are the things that we at the Finance Committee have discussed and addressed. What can we do with some of these reserve funds that are literally just sitting in our treasury waiting for us to either write a check to CalPERS or find an alternative investment where we can make more money than we're making in the treasury, our current treasury pool, and can use those investments and use those returns in order to offset and kind of stabilize the PERS rates that we're going to be seeing. That's one option, and I did bring it up at the budget hearings that might be an option that we really need to look at. It's called an IRS 115. It's something that I have discussed with this administration. I've discussed it with the former administration, that we have to do something, and we have to start quickly, and it's going to take, we basically have 5 years until we've hit the worst of it, but we have to start making decisions now so we can start inch by inch kind of catching up with it, or maybe getting ahead of it, which I don't think we'll get ahead of it, but at least it won't completely bury us. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is more from a, if we have this money setting aside for the 27th payroll, or that's PERS smoothing, which is what we had done, and that money is accumulated and been earning interest at the pooled rate, why not take those funds and find an alternative source for them where we can earn better than 1%? So that's really been the discussion thus far, and we're looking at, well, what type, so I think that's why we're looking for someone on the board to come and hear the same things that we're hearing, so that you can understand and see the same things that we're seeing, that this is a priority and that something needs to be done. But I think, this ad hoc committee, I think there should be an opportunity to also discuss potential other avenues, because this is not the magic pill. This is not going to cure what's going to happen in 5 years. There has to be a major shift at the department level, at the county, everything has to be considered and everything has to be on the table. The bill's coming. So, when we look at the general fund alone, I think I had estimated it's probably going to be between $4 and $5 million that the general fund's going to have to come up with. We are not seeing that much growth in revenue. So we either start figuring out a way that we can manage this, or it will be figured out for us. We have to, by law, pass a balanced budget. If your revenues do not match your expenditures, then by default you have to cut. And that's what I don't want to see, that control taken away from us and being able to make decisions that are in our best interests. So I think everything has to really be looked at, whether it's TOT, whether it's sales tax, fee studies, compensation packages, benefits, everything. How we're investing these funds in order to make some money that's better than our current treasury pool. So I think it's a broader discussion, but I think this is the start to that discussion. And we don't have a significant amount of time to have the discussion.
If I may.
Go right ahead, sir.
Perhaps we can, instead of doing an ad hoc, out of the public view, we do a study session and actually take on those big issues that you're talking about, because I agree with you. I think they're very large and we need to plan for them. I'm just concerned about making these kind of big policy choices out of the public view, to be honest.
Can I offer then perhaps, we have the PARS, which is the company that we were talking to, scheduled to come on January 4th. If I can get them instead to come on January 9th and actually do a full presentation to the board, would that be something the board would like to see?
Why would we talk to a vendor before we've made a policy decision that we want to go that direction
This would just be an information of, this is the program, this is what it offers, this is the flexibility, and then it allows the board members, each of you, to ask questions of that vendor.
Will we open it up to other vendors?
There really aren't very many vendors at this point. They're the only ones. More are doing funding of the of other employment benefits like health and dental for your retayees.
It's the OPEB.
Yeah.
They're doing the OPEB.
Our liability
funding.
in that category is very, very low. It doesn't make any sense for us to pre-fund that. Not as many, but now, PARS has really emerged as the, one that we have history with, long-standing reputation for offering the retirement benefit pre-funding option. So there really aren't a lot of vendors, so to speak, in this field.
And we have a relationship currently with PARS, who handles our alternative retirement plan for our extra hires.
I think my concern is not that, PARS is a vendor that's coming to solicit business from us. They aren't a consultant that's working for us, advising us on what's in our best interest. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. Or if they were our consultant and helping us figure our way forward, that's one thing. My opinion is known. There's 4 other opinions on this board.
Supervisor Mills and Supervisor Clapp. next. after-
Just to confirm, I am on the Debt Advisory Committee and the Investment Committee. So those are two, I'm active in at least investments. GASB 72, and looking at how the trajectory is going to play out going forward, the actuarials is what that is an important piece, and I think that Ms. Callan has a clear understanding of what that is too. LAIF isn't always an option, and I think what we need to do is look at all of the options, put them all on the table. Don't waste the entire staff time, board time, and pulling those together. Let's get them pulled together, and then we can make a complete presentation of the board with just 2 members and staff, and so that at least there's some vetting of a process here, and then we can pull it all out into the public and have a complete discussion. But I think that as we start to dig, we're going to find there's other options out there that we probably had never explored. But we also want to pull it up against an actuarial, because right now our trajectory is going into something that we can't sustain. And if we understand that we're going to have to start making some concessions somewhere along the line as to how we do this in the long term, this is the board that's going to have to start that trajectory going in the other direction. And so the more time we can spend right now thoroughly vetting out all the options and then bring it back to the full board without wasting all of the other time that would be involved, I think it would be very helpful to everyone.
And I think the issue is we are limited as a government on what we can do. So the IRS 115 is an option. It's a relatively new concept. It's only been around for the last handful of years. And it's taken counties and local entities some time to warm up to that idea for a multitude of reasons. Number one, not many jurisdictions, given the recession, just had money sitting around that they can go and invest somewhere, okay? So any counties that have opted into this, one of them sold a landfill. One of them, I think they negotiated with their employees to help pre-fund this. Some took, decided not to, they deferred maintenance. They made active decisions and policy decisions on how they were going to fund this. It really is one of the few ways that we can take funds out of our treasury and not limit them to what is required under government code for investments. Our entire treasury is it's slow and steady. That's what it is. So, we might only make 1%, but we don't lose money. It's there, so it will continue to be there. We don't have very high risk, even medium risk investments for a reason. It's slow and steady. And we're not really looking at doing anything extremely risky, but we do have this one avenue that would allow us better rates of return than our current pool. And outside of that, we have very limited opportunities. It's not like we can go in and negotiate with CalPERS to, could you not, lower the discount rate? That's a board decision that board is going to make. And the reality is, the writing on the wall is they're probably going to go down to a discount rate of probably 6.875 or 6 1/4 or 6 3/4. That directly impacts the county's cost to PERS. When they change the mortality age in their actuary, that negatively impacts us. Every time we do compensation changes here at the county, that impacts our unfunded liability. Every time, every single time we do anything that impacts compensation here at the county, it impacts our unfunded liability and it impacts our actuary. And, I think there are certainly some jurisdictions, there's only like 1 or 2 that don't have a massive unfunded liability. Everyone else does. So, don't feel like we have somehow gone awry and everyone else seems to be okay. We're all going to be experiencing the same problem and these same issues. But what I want to make sure is that we are meeting collectively. That's why, we ask that the Finance Committee come together, that we start having these discussions and start making decisions. But I want to make sure you as the board understand we have extremely limited options. This is one option. We've done other things with CalPERS, such as prepaying our lump sum payments, which does save us some money. We have done those types of things to try to help, but that's very minor compared to what we need to plan for the next 5 years.
We know that CalPERS is going to be meeting on the 18th. I had heard discussions about a discount rate of 7%. You hear 6.75 or 7.8. That's
They're going to tier it, so probably this first one's going to be 7, and then probably a year from there, you're going to see that 6.8.
But based upon your chart here, your compounding rate over 5 years is 28% per year.
Yeah, because what happens is that unfunded liability continues to compound, going up. We have to pay that down. In addition, all of those changes in actuary assumptions that have occurred over the last 3 years all converge, and it's all coming right now.
So let's get back to our item. Are we in a position now to?
Well, I want to comment on Supervisor Garamendi's his
Okay.
comments. I understand. I fully know where you're coming from, but I don't think it's the intention of this ad hoc committee to take anything away from the public. This ad hoc committee is not going to be formed to make any decisions at all, and then come and tell the board this is what we decided to do. The ad hoc committee is to keep at least 2 supervisors in the realm of what's going on in the discussions, and then bring back from that ad hoc committee to the board a presentation on what we've discovered or what we think the best path for this county to be is. And absolutely in no way would it be not vetted in public at all. So, but I understand what you're saying in public monies and investing and so forth. But we, in the investment committee, that Dennis sits on, and I've sat on it as an alternate, we invest county money all the time. This is not anything any different than that. Our reserve funding is being done, and we've experienced a lot of positive going down that road in investment. I don't think we've ever lost any money. The key is making it liquid, so if it starts to go south, you can pull it out and reinvest. It's not locked in. So
Yeah, and I want to also kind of reiterate what Supervisor Toffenelli is saying. This is kind of no different than when the Debt Advisory Committee meets. We do not make decisions. We discuss everything and we bring that forward to the board, and you get to make the decision if you want to go down the path that we're recommending or you don't. It's very similar to what we did on the refunding. It was a really good time to refinance our debt. If we had done it, if we had closed a little bit earlier before the presidential election, we would have saved a lot more money, but we still saved money. It's just still hard to remind myself that we could have saved more. But we brought that to the board. We kind of vetted that, had all these discussions with various vendors. We had conference calls. We looked at all of the options, and we brought that forward to the board. We made sure that you had a full presentation. You understood what we were looking at, why we were making those recommendations, and ultimately it's your decision if you want to do it or you don't want to do it. We can't do anything without your blessing. So this is just a way, I think it's important for the board to understand that this is going to be a multifaceted, multi-decision, multi-year changes that are going to have to occur. And we want to make sure that we have people on the board that are kind of in the trenches with us to understand all of the various factors.
Okay, thank you, Auditor Gillen. Say, let's, your recommendations on who would sit on this ad hoc committee would be 2 supervisors?
I thought you were going to ask who my recommendations were. Yes, 2 supervisors.
Okay, and the other members of this ad hoc committee would be who?
Well, obviously, it would work closely with the debt finance, or the finance committee, I should say, of the county. That will really be the primary working group.
Okay. Supervisor Mills, got a comment?
Well, I was just going to ask Rebecca, if you know what the current LAIF rate is? I know it's probably your most liquid account that you can work with.
Yes.
But it doesn't really give you a whole big return. I mean,
No.
it's
So,
ridiculous. It's like
no. No, so-
1.75 the last I saw.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that?
Yeah, so we're looking at, different options where, maybe we could earn 3% or maybe we could earn 4%, but not risky. It's just going to be a better portfolio than what we're currently doing. There is, of course, a risk to doing that because, maybe you don't make 4%, maybe you make 1%. That is a risk, but we're also risking the fact that we're only making pooled interest right now. That's it. So I think, it's looking at the portfolio, it's looking at the historical trends, it's looking at what's coming down the pike, it's considering all of that. I don't see that any different than what the Deferred Compensation Committee is doing right now, any different than what the the Treasury Oversight Committee is looking at, being aware of what's out there, being aware of what risk we're entertaining and what the consequences or the benefits of those are going to be.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Callen. I entertain a motion on this item?
Who's going to be on it?
Well, any suggestions, nominations?
Can't nominate ourselves.
Well,
But I would volunteer.
I would nominate Supervisor Mills.
And I would nominate Supervisor Tofinelli.
okay, we have 2 nominations, Supervisor Mills and Supervisor Tofinelli. Any further nominations?
For what period of time?
Nominations
for how
closed.
long?
What period of time? What period of time?
What period of time and
Purpose?
according to this would be 1 year, December 31st, 2018.
does say that.
was on-
Okay.
1 year? Council, that meet the format of our motion to be entertained here? Time limit and two candidate nominations?
Yes, in order for an ad hoc committee to be temporary in nature and to be essentially treated differently under the Brown Act, it has to be comprised solely of board members not constituting a quorum. It has to, in creating the committee, you have to define the purpose, the time frame in which to accomplish the purpose, and it has to be advisory in nature. So those are kind of the parameters that you need to work with making a motion.
Having clarity from county council, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I would move that we would establish a pension and liability ad hoc committee to review potential pension pre-funding options. And that Supervisor Mills and myself sit on that for a period of to not exceed 1 year.
Okay. Any second?
I'll second that.
Second by Supervisor Clapp. Public comment.
The Mark Twain Healthcare District has funding from the county of somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 a year, depending upon the tax rolls. That healthcare district, you might want to check with Dr. Randy Smart, but I know that they did some investing with Umpqua Bank. I don't remember at this point what the percentage was, but it's a local bank here, and the Mark Twain Healthcare District has worked with that person for several years now. So I just wanted to give you some input.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fry. Further public comment? Mr. DeRoro?
My only comment would be that I think when you bring this back to the board, first you should go through and make a very good, complete presentation so that the public understands what's happening with the PERS system. Because, you know, there's two steps here. One is how you're going to address it, but actually what is it you need to address? Because,
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0 unanimous. Madam Clerk.
Item 16 is from AB 109 to approve fiscal year 2017-18 CCP implementation plan with budget adjustment pursuant to section 1230.1C of the Penal Code. The plan shall be deemed accepted by the BOS unless rejected by a 4/5 vote.
Good afternoon, Mr. Leach.
Good
How are you?
afternoon. Long time no see. So I'll be very, very brief today. Most of what's in this Community Corrections Partnership spending plan, really all of it except for one item, is exactly what was included in final budget already. So, I mean, you guys have already seen and approved this spending plan with one exception that was discussed at the last CCP meeting and approved unanimously by the CCP members. So now I'm bringing this plan back to you to be finalized, along with a narrative version of everything that was funded, but with also the one proposed spending change. So that one change is the recommendation that the day reporting center, which is now in temporary trailers, would be moving to the Colombo building, which is where the probation department is now. That would have the ag department moving elsewhere, and us being the day reporting center taking over the ag side of the building. In reality, what will happen is the ag side will become the juvenile probation department, so we'll split the juvenile side off, which really is what should have always happened. Juveniles are supposed to be sight and sound separate. They should have a separate entrance. You shouldn't have juvenile probationers and their family members mingling with adults in the same lobby. So it really helps us out in a lot of ways. Also helps with some Department of Justice compliance issues that we're looking at as far as sharing buildings with other agencies that are not law enforcement. And frankly, the biggest benefit to the probation department is from a staffing coverage standpoint. You know, a lot of times we're trying to find two people to transport or a male to drug test an offender and these kind of things, and having us all together under the same roof will be really, really helpful. So that's part of why it was made. Also, you know, fiscally what this does is that portion of the building that would be picked up by AB 109 would be state funds instead of county funds, or however ag is split now. So with that, I know that's a real brief overview, but I'll just stop and answer any questions that the board has.
Any questions of Mr. Leach by the board? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back. Entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Tofinelli,
Second?
second by Supervisor Garamendi. Public comment has been addressed. Call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0 unanimous. Madam Clerk.
Item 17 is from the Planning Department to approve 2017-099 General Plan Amendment from Public Service to Commercial on APN 018-007-043.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm just fine, thank you.
Hi, Dory.
So much like everything else we do in planning, we're a little bit complicated. One project, two different actions. We have before you an application from Ms. Dixie Lee Adams for a general plan amendment and a zoning amendment. She has purchased the old McCalmy Hill Fire Station on Main Street in McCalmy Hill. And her intentions are to actually operate a retail business and a beer and wine bar from that location. Problem being is that the property is currently zoned PS, which was appropriate for the McCalmy Hill Fire Station, but is not so appropriate for the intended use. So she has made an application to us to amend the zoning to commercial, specifically C2. But before we can adopt the C2 zoning, we also have to amend the land use designation. Currently, it is also public service, which does not allow commercial zoning. So to be consistent with the commercial district and for the purpose of zoning the property, we will need to also approve a general plan amendment from the current public service designation to commercial. With that, we did go before the Planning Commission, took everything into consideration, including public comment, for which Ms. Adams did have several members of the McCalmy Hill community that stood up in support of her request to C2. And the Planning Commission's recommendation to you is to adopt the general plan amendment from the current public service designation to commercial, which was item 17, and then the following item on the agenda, 18, would be addressing the zoning amendment itself. Okay. From the current public service or PS zone to C2, general commercial.
Any questions of staff? Dory? Okay. Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back for a vote, or actually a motion, I'm sorry. Entertain a motion?
I'd like,
I'll let Jack do it.
thank you very much, Clyde. I'd like to, can I do them both at the same time?
Yeah.
No?
No.
On item number 17, I'd like to make a motion to approve the item 17. I won't read it all out.
That's the general plan amendment.
General plan amendment.
I would second that.
Second by, actually, motion by Supervisor Garamendi, seconded by Supervisor Clapp. Public comment's been addressed. I'll bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Item 17, Madam Clerk.
Item 18 is from the Planning Department to approve 2017-099 zoning amendment from PS PD, Public Service Plan Development, to C2 PD, General Commercial Plan Development on APN 018-007-043.
Again, your Planning Commission has considered this and has recommended that you adopt the C2 zoning. So that would be a zoning amendment from the current PS Public Service Zone to C2 General Commercial.
Okay. Any public comment on item 18? Any questions of staff? Hearing none? I'm sorry, Mr. Fry?
You said C2.
C2.
But it says C2PD.
Oh, excuse me. The plan development has to be applied. You are correct, thank you. We have a tendency to kind of forget that these days just because we're kind of in the works of doing away with the PD. But yes, that would be from PS PD to C2 PD, which, as you probably already know, is the signifier for the plan development permit, just to basically make findings of consistency for new construction in the historic district of McCalmy Hill to be compatible or compliant with the adopted McCalmy Hill design guidelines.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Any public comment after that clarification? I'll bring it back. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering what they intend to do commercially there. Well, I didn't catch it.
Ma'am, you'll have to speak into the microphone.
I didn't catch what they said they intend to do with that commercial, this last commercial idea.
What's the, if I understand it correctly, what's the intent of the change? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know the old fire station.
Right.
Is this adjacent to that old fire station?
I'll let planning answer that.
So the property in question is the old fire station. It is adjacent to the town hall, just across the street from the hotel. And currently, the parcel is zoned appropriately. Well, it used to be zoned appropriately because it used to be the home of the firehouse, the fire district's fire station, and it's currently zoned public service, which does not allow commercial uses such as the proposed use, which is a wine and beer bar within the building, in addition to a retail establishment. So none of that is permitted in the public service zone, and the owner wishes to, commence a new business, start up a new business, and she can't do that in the current zoning. So the only difference is, as Mr. Fry explained or reminded me, is that the PD is a combining zone, which currently is in place to ensure that any new development or any new construction of any parcels within the historic district are compatible or found compliant with the current guidelines, design guidelines that are adopted through your community plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Dory.
Make a motion.
Supervisor Garamendi?
I'm sorry, Supervisor Toffenali.
This is Supervisor Garamendi's District 2, and I'd like to hear from him before I decide.
No, gentlemen, I'm trying to take the approach that less is more. This is actually a great addition to the community. Many of you know, if you've been down to downtown Moke Hill, it is a building that is not being utilized well since the fire department moved over to the Mike DeLordo Fire Station. But it fits very nicely with the community, and there's a lot of community input that's gone into it. Miss Adams has excellent taste and runs a great retail establishment right next door. Dixie's Feather Your Nest, if you guys are still shopping for your Christmas gifts. I encourage you all to come to, as I mentioned, I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce. Come to Moke Hill and do your shopping. But this has got a lot of community support, and I know Dixie's going to do a really nice job, and it's part of the real activity that's happening on Main Street. So I'm glad she's got the courage to take this on, and I wish her the best, and I think the county should move ahead with this and let this woman get to business.
Is that your motion?
And my motion is to approve the zoning amendment from PSPD to C2PD, General Commercial Plan Development, for this site.
Motion on the floor, second?
I would second that.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi, seconded by Supervisor Clapp. Any further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 5-0, unanimous. We'll expect an invitation to the grand opening. Wow.
Can I shake your hands?
Oh, you can use the microphone right there, and
Okay, it's been a long, I've been green about this whole thing. I just want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity, and come on in and have a beer or a glass of wine.
okay, thank you. Madam Clerk.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Okay, who would like to go first on the board? Supervisor Clapp, we'll go for now when your light's on, sir.
Anyway, I attended Area 12 last week, and you guys got a bargain because it was in our county, and it didn't cost you a dime.
Okay. Supervisor Mills.
Very quiet this past week since the last meeting, so Merry Christmas to that.
All right, Supervisor Toffenelli.
Sure. I attended an RCRC meeting in Sacramento as the alternate for Supervisor Garamendi, and as I spoke earlier about tree mortality, it was a topic that was spoke about there, especially the concerns about the insurance companies dropping homeowners and not letting them renew their policies. That's coming up. January usually is the beginning of the year for policies for homeowners, so it's a grave concern. Also the concern of the trees and the length of time they've been dead and the number of trees that are falling. And we experienced several here and falling across power lines. The concerns there were them falling over power lines. Luckily, the ones that fell here were local. We were able to see them. Their concerns are the ones that are out and way out and not generally seen, and the concerns of fires associated with that, and actually trying to get some litigation on the floor to address these issues. And I also attended a COG meeting to which I'm happy to report a couple items from that meeting last Wednesday night. The COG, through efforts of the CAO and myself and Public Works, put forth some applications, and the one application for Valley Springs Elementary School grant has been tried to push through several times. It was announced last Wednesday by Caltrans. It has been funded this time. So we have a planning and engineering grant money coming available for that in January. Also, a grant we put in for Polk Street, and that was funded also by Caltrans. Okay. So beginning of the year, we should have funds available, send out RFPs to get quotes for the planning and engineering part of that, those aspects of those jobs. And once that's accomplished and we get those in hand, we will have what's called a shovel-ready project, and it will be giving us opportunities for funding to put those projects on the ground and in construction phase. Also at that meeting, during Caltrans' presentation to the COG board, they announced that starting in 2018, for the next 4 years, through basically what they call their SHOP program, and money was allocated through SB1 for it. They will spend about $42 million in Calaveras County over that four-year period. And there's a list of projects that was given to us, a draft, and I passed those on to the CAO so he can pass those on and post them. And I will send a copy down to Diane so she can post those. And it's very positive. Caltrans is very happy with what's happening here in Calaveras County. And I want to thank Carl for his help in pushing those projects through, especially the grants and these projects here that are coming towards Calaveras County. And
Thank you,
that's my
Supervisor.
report.
Supervisor Garamendi.
That's always a good report when you're bringing home money. I wish we could always report that. We did have I didn't have any meetings that I was charged in the county for this week, although I did drive to all the way over to the Days Inn in Jackson, but that's not very far of the county line. The Sierra Nevada Conservancy, we hosted them here in Calaveras last week, and thank you, Gary, for covering at RCRC. But we hosted them. We took them up through the Butte Fire Scar, as well as saw some fire breaks that we're working on up in West Point area. We had a limited amount of time for a field trip, but we had really good turnout from the Forest Service as well as many state agencies. Wanted to come up and see what was going on. We had a meeting that evening. We had a reception that I hosted at the Leger Hotel. And we were greeted by our Secretary of Natural Resources, John Laird, who came up, which was great. The point of having everybody up was to really, Sierra Nevada Conservancy has been a big funder of a lot of projects in our communities. especially upcountry over the last decade. So, when we look at the park bonds and things that are going forward, there's big carve-outs within the park bonds. So really having a partner like Sierra Nevada Conservancy who understands our county, our needs, especially around things like healthy forests, is a real advantage to us. So I was very grateful that I got to serve this last year on their board. Unfortunately, our term is up. The ball passes to Tuolumne County for the next 2-year term, but we just need to remember that we've got some really good friends, and we've been able to establish some good contacts down in Sacramento and across the foothills through this organization. We also hosted a tribal forum to talk about some of their issues that local tribes have, which is an important thing to keep in mind and have a great importance to both our community and the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. And then, of course, on Sunday was Moke Hill Open House. So a good time had by all. Mr. Tofinelli has promised next year to come and do some of his Christmas shopping in Calaveras, Moke Hill, which is greatly appreciated. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Garamendi. On the 6th, I attended the Agenda Review Committee meeting for today's meeting. Also, I had contact with Paul DeBarlo of our Continuing Technical Education Program. If you'll remember, that's the program that, the board approved and sponsored, which I'm representing the county on. We are going to be issuing a press release with school districts advising a job fair day or introduction day. That's going to be held sometime, I believe, in January, the latter 2 weeks. We attended the law library meeting. As you may or may not know, the committee is required by law through the state, and it's under the jurisdiction of a sitting Superior Court judge in the county, which is Judge Healy. Some very important issues were discussed, and one of them was to digitize and bring up our law library to the digital world. You may not know that we have hard copy libraries right here in this building, and that transition was decided at that committee to do that and move the location to the San Andreas Library. This is something that's going to kind of bring us up in the 20th century, actually 21st century, although it will relieve us of some very hard labor duties of maintaining the hard copies of law books. As you well know, or you may not know, that most jurisdictions are going to digital law libraries using various records, so that's another improvement we're making on that.
And when you say out into the 21st century, just the location of the law library and the dungeon below our chambers here is an indication of bringing it up to the 21st century.
That's actually true. I think we had to cross a moat to get into there. But no, seriously, that's going to make things a lot easier. That'll be an ADA compliant facility over at our new library, and with the addition of electronically it's accessing the laws and forms and things of that sort required for criminal justice systems or civil systems. It's going to help us quite a bit. I did attend the COG meeting, not as a representative, but as a spectator, and I was very proud of the results of that with our representatives and our board members, Supervisor Mills, Supervisor Tofinelli, and our commissioner from District 3, Commissioner Tim Muries. I see the COG making great strides now. I was particularly impressed by the funding. $42 million just for Calaveras County. That's huge. I'm glad to say that on that list of projects is a project in District 3. I don't know if that start date's going to be set that close, but it's going to be a major project on Pennsylvania Avenue, or actually Pennsylvania Gulch Road on Highway 4 all the way to Tom Bell Road. And they're going to be putting a left-hand turn lane. Is that correct? Supervisor Tofinelli?
Yeah, I believe there's projects in all 5 districts.
Good.
It's my understanding that there will be at least one project in all 5 districts. And it's possibility, when I had a discussion with him about extending a turn lane from Vista del Lago west to a turn-in lane. Yeah, where the first, yes. Where
Yeah,
the
that-
collision that occurred after the signalization was turned on.
On the 7th, I attended the Murphy's Business Association meeting. They had a very successful Christmas parade and open house. And that is one of our model organizations, I must say. I'm very, very impressed in the progress they've made, and also the Murphy's Community Club. District 3 is benefiting greatly from that operation, and Murphy's itself and our wine and tourist industry. I hope to see that continue, and we'll be doing all we can to support that, along on a county-wide basis also, with our Visitors Bureau and with Chambers. I also attended a meeting with one of our volunteers from our Sheriff's Department in the Murphy's area regarding a neighborhood watch program. As you may or may or not know, we have a new staff person in charge of our neighborhood watch due to promotions and transfers with the Sheriff's Department. And I believe it's Sergeant Whiting now is in charge of that. And I would encourage everybody, especially the folks viewing us on closed-circuit TV and also on our public access, if you don't have an established neighborhood watch party or neighborhood watch organization, now's the time to start one. I've seen some very successful organizations, and I've seen some folks that probably need a little help. You can contact our Sheriff's Department, contact Sergeant Whiting to get started on that. Those are things that are needed. More eyes out there will prevent crime from occurring and will solve crimes that are occurring. So if you'll take that in consideration, I'll be a happy camper. That's all I have to report. Staff, any reports? No report from staff. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. I'm sorry. Mr. Fry, you had a comment.
Yes, I have a point of order.
I'm dying to hear it.
I asked you about the item number 13, that whether you were going to have any public members, and you said that you would address that later. I didn't know whether...
Yeah, my intention was to address it later when we decide how we're going to form the committee and who's going to sit on it. But I will take your suggestion in consideration when that time comes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further? Meeting adjourned.